So it was really important for me during that singleness time to spend time with young married couples or older married couples who had their eyes on Jesus, so that I learnt what to look for in a relationship.
Hello and welcome to the Overflow Podcast. This is a podcast on a mission to discover how you and I can live a life of abundance, full to overflowing. In Season 5, we're learning how to cultivate thriving relationships and how, through the good times and the bad, we can maintain the overflow. This is episode 39. My name is Karl Lindsay, and I'm joined by my friend and co-host, Filip Miller-Savlovich. Filip, sitting next to me, I got a question for you, Phil.
Yeah.
In talking about relationship topics so much, do you think the church has neglected to pour value into the stage of singleness?
Oh my goodness. Definitely. I think we talk about the fact that people will be married. We talk about marriage conferences, but honestly, we should do singleness conferences.
And not just not attend so you can find a spouse.
That's right. I think single ministry is kind of one of those, some people like cringe, like, oh gosh, the singles camp. I'm not going to that. But I think there's a way to do it well and wisely, and I think the church has been outside of that discussion for some time. And culture really gives us a lot of what it thinks about singleness and what should happen. And so I think if we could reimagine that for our young people and give them a more beautiful brand, a vision that's grander than what society gives, I think we'll set them up for a great course. And so But it's just something that we need to do more of. Yeah, absolutely. Next weekend, actually, here in Loma Linda, we're going to be doing a conference on the topic of sexual wholeness, and in particular for singles.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm really excited. We have a few people that have been on some television dating shows. One on NBC, the other potentially, I can't even say the show because they're not allowed to, they're under contract. So they're going to be coming, hopefully. And then our senior pastor, he's a licensed marriage and family therapist. And so I really am excited for that. And it's all about singles and this topic of sexuality and how do we traverse that and how do we do this well? So... Yeah.
Will that be on YouTube later?
We're still in debate because these people are on TV. It's weird contract stuff. So hopefully we can...
Some of it.
Yeah, hopefully some of it for sure. It would be wonderful.
Well, we'll be letting you guys know, those of you listening. We'll put it in the show notes if it's there. If it's not, well, sorry about it. Well, this season, as we said, is all about building a relationship that is overflowing. And we're covering topics that apply to various stages of romance, from the single life to wedding bells and beyond. The happily ever after life can seem so out of reach, as we've said before, but never more so than when you're freshly single or when there's just no relationship in sight.
Oh, right.
So we've got some guests lined up for you this season to guide us on this journey. So we want to pour value into your relationships and help you overflow too. So again, whether you're single, dating, engaged, or married, we hope these conversations are helpful. Please share these episodes with your friends. Leave us a review or rating on your podcast app. Send us a message on Instagram at Choose to Overflow. We want to hear feedback. We want to hear your questions. We'd love just to dialogue with you. Today on the episode, we have a conversation coming up with a friend of mine from Australia, just about the initial period in everyone's romantic life, the single life. So Erin Keegan. Erin is with us. She's a nursing lecturer at Avondale University in Australia. She's passionate about health, exercise, and telling others about the abundant life that can be experienced through obedience to God's word. She's just recently gotten married and spent most of her 20s figuring out life on her own in that way. So welcome to the show, Erin. Glad you're here.
Hi, gentlemen. How are you?
Wonderful.
We're doing great.
So excited that you're here.
So you got married just recently, yeah?
I did. I am married as of 3 months ago. We got married just before the COVID lockdown prevented weddings from going ahead, which meant that we actually dated during COVID season. And can I just say, dating in COVID was awesome because we couldn't go out for expensive restaurant meals and, down into the city and do all these money-sucking dates. Instead, we got to know each other sitting around a campfire in the company of our families. It was probably the most realistic dating season you could ever have.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
it sounds like courtship, like 1905 with your family and the fire. And
that word courtship has so gone up in my books since experiencing it. It's it is a biblical concept for sure. God knew what he was doing.
Yes. My wife and I, this is embarrassing to some people, but for me, I loved it. I asked my wife to start a courtship. So the idea is like purposeful dating with the intention of marriage in mind right from the beginning. Mm-hmm. And so our parents were very involved. And Elena's mom and dad read every email and letter I sent her.
Whoa.
Yep. So it was, I didn't know until much later. So thank God I was pretty kosher. Well, Erin, we are stoked that you're here and are excited to hear from you and our listeners to learn from you. So, thank you.
Yeah, so you gave me a little couple of sentences for the bio that we just talked about. You're engaged in the nursing world, but tell us a little bit more about yourself outside of that and what your journey's been like over the last decade.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm a cancer nurse by trade, been doing that for the last 10 years. And during the period of my 20s, really fell in love with the health message and with exercise and with surfing and just being really involved in my church. And for me, I think I was born into a leadership position, whether I wanted to be or not. And so whatever I did, people would tend to look towards as an example of for them. And I can definitely say during my teens that was an undesirable effect because I decided to push some boundaries that others felt would be okay for them to push as well because I was doing it. And then I realized that during a season of some particularly poor decisions that I'd made, other people actually began to lose the stability of their faith because of examples that I'd set. And whether you choose to be or not, people do look at your life and you are in a bit of a green room. And I was really convicted by that and decided that there came a point in time where I didn't want to be a stumbling block for other people anymore. And I wanted whatever I did in my relationships to be something that I would be willing to advocate for to my youth group. And I can definitely say that in this courtship with Trent, who is now my husband, for the first time in my life, I dated and we chose to date because he set that as the standard by doing things that we would be happy to advocate for to our youth group and to stand in front of our families without having guilt or shame or feeling embarrassed. And to be honest, like there's so much this side of the sex line that makes you feel guilty and shamed and embarrassed. And I feel like if sex was the real line in the sand, then we wouldn't be experiencing those emotions that come with all of that intimate action without crossing that line. And so I think that we've been falsely sold this idea that that's the real line in the sand. I believe now that there is so much joy and safety and fun that is amplified into that relationship when you actually protect each other's hearts. We know that breakups are particularly painful to the point where, it can make you never want to see a relationship again because it feels like a divorce because you've added layers of complexity. And yet when you date God's way, you are protecting your heart and protecting their heart so that if it goes towards marriage or if it doesn't, it can still be a successful dating season of getting to know someone. And so this was a real game changer for me. Dating Trent, so my husband's name is Trent, and I have to say, unless you and your boyfriend or girlfriend are on the same page, it's a real uphill battle because the standards of purity, unless you're both fighting for the same thing, are so easy to compromise and so easy to stay up late at night snuggling or just doing things that lead to a slippery slope. And for us, we decided that that was a spark that we didn't want to have to put out. Like we didn't want to have to say, oh, let's stop here. We actually wanted to not force each other to need to employ self-control when it was harder to do so. So Trent had gone through his own heartaches, and I think that really taught us both that we didn't want to do that again. And so this time we both made the decision that we wanted clarity to see each other for who we really were. And believe me, like without having those physical elements, you see clearly. And for us, we saw clearly that this was marriage material. So during that time of getting to know someone, there's this incredible book that we read called 101 Questions to Ask Before You Get Engaged. And it enables you to see each other in as many different situations as possible. And all of these answers are going to come out one day. So you may as well find them out now. And like, honestly, in that singleness stage, like just not to hate that and not to rush that, because the truth is that many of us will unite our lives with someone at some stage. And so it's a season that for many of us won't last forever. And there are things that God can teach you in every single season, which means if you skip a season and you bounce from relationship to relationship without allowing yourself to be single, then you miss out on things that God can only teach you things when you're single, just the same as he can only teach you some things in a relationship. And so not to hate that formative stage. For me, in that stage of singleness, there was a great process of self-development and growth. And you will know that, when you're single, you're not taking anyone else into account. It's you and God. Like it's you and your career. Like, where do you want that to go? What do you want to study? It's you and your finances, like getting a job, buy a house, go and travel, like so that you're not restricted if you get into a relationship where the other person doesn't want to do those things. And so I really feel like there's less resentment when you're single in its fullness, because at that time then you're not going to blame someone for clipping those parts of you that you're like, no, this is actually really important to me. For example, I dated a young man, a great young man. I have to say I have good taste. We didn't get married, but I was in a relationship where this young man did not enjoy spending time with his family and also was not keen on hospitality. And family happens to be super important to me, as does opening my home after church to 30 young people coming around for lunch. And I realized that if that relationship was to continue, that the spiritual gifts that God had given me would actually not be able to flourish. And so being single and figuring out what are those things that you're not willing to compromise on are incredibly important. Like learn what you love doing, learn what makes you come alive, learn what kind of ministry it is that you're into. My husband, he actually needed to be single when he accepted God's call to ministry. So he's a ministry and theology student. When he was single, he felt God call him to that and wrestled with that in his own career. He had to close his business in order to do it. But he witnessed other students say no to the call of God to follow the direction to ministry because their wives were not ready yet. And they said, like, sweetheart, our family's not ready. You can't go into ministry. You can't go into ministry. And yet at this time, Trent was able to follow that call because it was just him and God. And he was like, Lord, if you bring a woman into my life, then at least she knows what she's getting into. She's buying a minister product like that. It's not like she married a chippy or a construction worker and then became a minister.
That's awesome.
So
there's so much that you're saying, Erin, like, oh my goodness, I want to stop you every 3 minutes. But, I absolutely love the fact that you both realize that singleness has a fullness to it, as opposed to a hole, as to a void, as to a space in which you are subhuman almost, as opposed to living in the fullness of your
Yes.
your enjoyments. Like, what do you love doing?
Yes.
Do it to the full now.
Yes.
Don't wait on X, Y, and Z just because you don't
Yeah.
have a life partner.
Yeah, and living in that stage in hope of a life partner. So I chose to invest in cooking during that time because one day I just expected that I would be a wife and a mum, and so learn recipes during that time. But also too, like in addition to doing the things that you love and working out what you're not willing to compromise on, there is a great deal of wisdom that comes from reading Christian books because we're not born knowing how to love. We're not born knowing how to date in a godly way. And so it was really important for me during that singleness time to spend time with young married couples or older married couples who had their eyes on Jesus so that I learnt what to look for in a relationship.
That's good. Let me stop you there. Because that idea, I want to ask why you think this conversation is relevant because of if we're not pursuing those good relationships that you're talking about or looking in the Christian dating books, etc., what the other messages we're receiving are from Hollywood and secular society. So can you talk about why that particular pursuit is so important and how it contrasts with what we are receiving, the messages we're receiving from society?
Yeah, there's an awesome verse in the book of John, which is Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. It's the fourth gospel in the Bible, John chapter 10, verse 10. And it says these words. It says, "The thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy. But I have come," this is Jesus talking, "I have come that they may have life and life abundantly."
Yeah.
And we have to realize that when we feel things being stolen from us, like our purity or our happiness or our joy, killing, destroying, that those are not things of God. But God has come that we may have life and have life abundantly, have life to the full. And so for in that singleness stage, we know that comparison is the thief of joy. It is really difficult to watch your friends go through those stages of life. Like being single is tough. Like that's a hard stage.
Yeah.
You see other people dating, you see other people getting engaged, you see other people getting married, you see other people having kids, and you long for when that's your turn. What was really important to me during that stage was to see women who were single older than me, so a few years on, who were kicking at life, who were successful, who were happy, who were thriving, who were not desperate, because desperation is not an attractive quality. People who are fully satisfied and whole in God alone, that is an attractive quality. And in the book of Isaiah in the Bible, Isaiah 54 verse 5 says these words, "Your maker is your husband. The Lord Almighty is his name." And I held on to that verse, that in the absence of God giving me an earthly husband, that he would in fact be everything that I needed. And you can't marry Jesus. So I would have to marry a sinful human being at some stage. But during that season, that I could be complete and satisfied in God alone, that I didn't need a relationship to be able to contribute to society or be able to be meaningful in my ministry at church or be able to be worth loving.
That's amazing.
There is so much that's cool about not being willing to take matters into your own hands just because you're so keen to get into a relationship. I really encourage you guys. I had a housemate who was dating Mr. Incredible, and he ticked every box. Like he was outdoorsy, he had a great job, awesome family, super helpful around the house. Like he was everything that he wanted in a man. She wanted in a man, except the God box. And she was so doubtful that at that stage of her life, God was capable of bringing all of those, items together in a person and the God box, that she chose to pursue a relationship with him. And like when you surround yourself with people, you become like them, right? You meet them halfway, you compromise, you meet half in the middle. And if that person is not pursuing God, then they are going to, by default, draw you in the opposite direction, away from a pursuit of God. And the concept of being unequally yoked, like I challenge you, how important is that God box for you? Because like in the Bible, we see over and over and over again that God does not need our help finding us a life partner. In Genesis, right at the beginning, God says, like, it's not good for man to be alone. Like, God knows that. That's his plan. Marriage is God's plan. And he says, I will make a helper suitable for him. So I just had to remind myself, like, Erin, who's going to make you a spouse? Like, do you have to find yourself one? Or
how far does that go, Erin, for you, when you think about, for instance, individuals who have that kingdom call, they're being faithful to the gospel, and yet do they need to, quote unquote, put themselves out there? I see this time and time again as a young adult pastor, these wonderful girls, leaders, and all of a sudden they throw up this image that is scandalous. Literally, I mean, it's just, I'm like, why are you doing that? It's like this notion of baiting someone into, hey, recognize me, look at me, I'm sexy as well as X, Y, and Z. I mean, how far do you go to, quote unquote, catch the person? Or, I mean, how did that work for you?
Yeah, great question. I think that if we need to dress down in order to get that attention, that's not the attention that we should be wanting. That concept of the apples at the top of the tree. You don't want someone who only wants to reach with their elbow to catch that. You want someone who's got the courage and the character to climb to the top of the tree and get you. So to not, the temptation to want to make the chase easier just in order to get to that next stage is very real, but those are not qualities of someone that you want in a husband. The qualities that we want is someone who is a leader, someone who has integrity, someone who values you with modesty. There was this like crazy concept that God only taught me in the last couple of years. This is before I met Trent, but he convicted me that so I grew up on the beaches. We lived in bikinis. That was very common attire. And yet what I became increasingly convicted of was that I wanted someone who didn't pursue what they saw, but who they spoke to. And so Ellen White writes extensively on this concept of modesty. And she says these words, in all the deportment of one who possesses true love, the grace of God will be shown. Modesty, simplicity, sincerity, morality, and religion will characterize every step of an alliance towards marriage. And she goes on to say, in her dress and in all her manners, she shows and understands that a true woman of God is characterized by moral worth.
Wow.
So these are the qualities that we want to find in a spouse, which means that these are the qualities that we need to be cultivating in our singleness, to realize that you don't have to market your body in order to be desirable or attainable, but that someone whose eyes are fixed firmly on God is actually a desirable quality. So when Trent and I met, we were at our summer camp. He was activities director and I was there as the speaker. It was at teen camp, and both of us were just serving, doing what God had called us to. And I found when I saw him up the front leading teen ministry, that was someone that could lead me, like that was someone who was passionate, who was not desperate, not, flirting with every girl that came his way. In fact, he referred to all the girls as sisters. So just to kind of put a barrier there.
I love it. I love it. Now, what happens when someone doesn't have what they would call these type of godly men, godly women, people that are admirable around them. They feel as though they're almost in this
vacuum.
Yeah.
I mean, like you kind of talked about that with that quote there. You talked about the idea of all these great qualities that I should be working on in myself. But what if there's no one of the opposite sex who is also working on that?
Of caliber.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that is so real. So real. So I think we are sold an idea that there's less fish in the sea the older you get. And like I remember my mum and her mum were both married at 20. So at 19, I said to Dad, "Hey, Dad, one more year." And he was like, "Babe, people get married a lot older these days." And so, but at 21, I just assumed that I'd be married. And that didn't happen. And then at 25 and then at 27,
right.
I had a big relationship of 3 years breakdown. And I just remember thinking I've missed the boat.
Yeah.
Like my friends are all now in this next season of life and I'm not there. When I remembered the story of Gideon in the Bible, that he had 32,000 men, and God said, "That's too many. Keep dropping them down, keep dropping them down." Like God doesn't need numbers. He doesn't need odds. And I believe that like God, so Trent will use this analogy in terms of the fish in the sea. And he says that the longer the fish are in the sea, the bigger and better they grow. I was like, there is nothing wrong with dating later in life. Not to say that the young fish never grow big, but but that those ones who are also in the sea have spent longer self-developing during that singleness stage.
You know, I think there's something true to that, because when I see people who get married now later in life, there is some stability that, for instance, my wife and I did not have. You know, we were married at 20 and 22. We were very young. We were very poor. We were very idealistic. We didn't know how to deal always with conflict the very best. We really were almost toxic at times for each other. And so I think there is some real truth to what you just said, Erin. Well, what Trent said, really, his analogy.
What Trent said. What I had to learn was that there was no expiry date, though, on singleness.
Right.
That you didn't reach an unattainable age. Like, and I don't think that it's better to be married if you're going to be unhappily married. Like, no, it's better to be happily single than just to get married for the sake of it. And if you think that, you know, it takes giving parts of yourself that you can't get back, like, don't force yourself to have those flashbacks. Don't force yourself to carry that baggage into marriage one day. If you're not in a relationship that you believe has the potential for marriage, then get out. You know, like every time that you date, you're just breaking a heart if you're not in it with eyes to see this person one day as your spouse. So our biggest challenge then is to date in a way that doesn't ruin that person in case it's not you that they end up marrying.
Wow.
I want to come back to the time in your life when you said, "Oh, I'm hoping to be married at 21, I'm hoping to be married by 25, 27. You've kind of touched on it in different ways, but maybe be a little bit more direct. Like, how did you deal with the frustration and the innate longing for a relationship that you said, like, God did create us for relationships? So talk to the single person who's 27 and in the similar stage where they were maybe 8 years ago, they thought they'd be married with kids by now.
Yeah. So in the book of Genesis, chapter 3, verse 1, there is a very initial lie that Satan says to Adam and Eve. And the lie is basically that God would withhold good from them. And this is a lie that I had to unlearn because I intrinsically believed that if I left finding my life partner to God, that he would choose deliberately for me to teach me a lesson, someone who was ugly, socially awkward, poor, and just like these were all of the qualities that I thought that God would bring someone into my life.
For a lesson.
Just like to teach me, right? And that is an incorrect belief of God, that his desire, like God's desires for you are actually not for harm and not even just for good, but for awesome. And we know that in Jeremiah 29:11.
Yeah.
Believing that, what that looks like is that you understand that because God made you with all of your qualities and all of the skills that you possess, that he knows best who to fit you with. And during this time of singleness, not to hate this season. So, Jesus says, come unto me, those who are weary, and I will give you rest. Like, let me take the responsibility of looking for a life partner for you. Seek me first. In Matthew 6:33, seek first the kingdom of God. Seek first the kingdom. And you know what? Like, when you seek him, you realize that you have the stability, that you have the love, that you have the joy, that you have the companionship, that you have the safety, all of those qualities that you're looking for in a spouse. If you expect your potential spouse one day to fulfill all of those parts of you, that's an exhaustive requirement on a human being that was never meant to carry that.
Right.
So first and foremost, that requirement is put on God, and you are full and whole and complete in that. But realizing at the same time that if God opens up the door, that you are receptive to doing life with someone, because just as we said, there are things you can only learn when you're single.
Yeah.
There's also things you can only learn with a relationship.
Right.
Yep.
That they have different priorities to you, that
gotta
they
learn,
load the dishwasher differently to you, that they want to go to place A and you want to go to place B. And so those qualities of patience and selflessness is what's cultivated, being joyful. That's what's cultivated in a relationship. And so really important, like when you have perhaps freshly come out of a relationship and your heart has been damaged as a result of that, the temptation is to close your heart off to love forever, because all men are the same, right? Like that's what we tell ourselves. But the truth is that they're not all the same, and that you can't blame future men for past men's mistakes because they haven't committed those crimes. And so having the courage to give each person a fresh chance takes a huge amount of courage and strength, and just being like, God, I choose to date in a way because my heart has been hurt in the past. And I don't want to say that's awesome, but it is awesome because it teaches you to protect your heart with boundaries next time around.
That's a great point. And I wonder how many people right now are listening and they're like, you know what? I have been hurt, but also potentially by never being asked out, or feeling like they've always been rejected. How would you speak to those people who potentially are getting older, or they're younger potentially, and no one's pursued them, or the ones they do pursue always are saying no? I mean, how do you stay encouraged?
There are so many names of friends that come to mind when you said that. And what I long for them is that they could experience what it's like to be in a relationship, because they have so much love in their heart, ready and ripe. I would use that word, ripe, to give from an outsider's point of view looking in. What I see there is for some of those friends, I see that they need to be putting themselves in situations where like-minded people are at a similar stage and age in life.
So kind of like you went to summer camp and that's where you met Trent, right? You were putting yourself into a place where there's other young adults ministering.
Yeah, exactly. So positioning yourself to meet and interact in healthy ways. And can I suggest to you that ways where you can serve and you can observe other people serving, because that is such a handsome quality. So places like your camp meetings, like your summer camps, like your Pathfinders, youth socials at church. So being available and open to the idea of interacting with people who are in a similar demographic in life. I think one of the best lessons that I have learned is that your job is not to run after people, but it's to run after Jesus. And when you look to him as being your goal and your focus, like Paul talks about this concept in 1 Corinthians of running the race, right? So you're running and you're pursuing God. At some stage, you're going to look to your side and see someone running in the same direction at a similar pace.
Yes.
And that is someone worth saying hello to.
Yes.
Right.
Not the person who's stopping to get distracted, slowing down.
Yeah.
I always feel that angst in my heart when I see two people that I know are not well matched. And one is slowing down or they're not even running. And I'm like, what is going on here?
Yeah.
But, people have so many great qualities. And I think what you said earlier on is just, what is the greatest priority? And if they do not have that greatest priority, they're really not running the same race.
Yeah.
That's the whole thing. They're running a different race for a different prize, and it isn't the kingdom. And that will not be a happy ending.
It reminds me last week, like we talked with Ranella Kelligithi last week, and she talked about the 5 areas that you should look for in terms of 5 areas of attraction. We're attracted in physical, material, intellectual, but emotional and spiritual too. And those last 2 are the most important.
Yeah.
And so that's what we're talking about when you're looking for someone, looking side to side to see who's keeping pace with you. That's, like Erin said, that's the people to say hello to.
Absolutely. One of my good friends, she would always say, you want to find a beautiful spouse? Find them while you serve at church. Find them while you're serving the kingdom. Don't assume they're going to pop up out of nowhere, like God will deliver them to your door. It's like you said, there is positioning in some way, but I would call it kingdom positioning.
I would as well. And in Genesis chapter 2, we see that Adam was working, right? He was toiling in the garden before God brought him Eve.
Yeah.
So he was busy. He was going about doing stuff and he was serving.
Yeah.
And I love that concept of like the timing is not our concern. Like the story of Noah. Noah was building an ark for a very long time before when the rains would come. But he was doing it obediently and he was doing it in hope that the rains would come. So it's that act of preparing and in working, believing that God has a direction for you that is healthy and good because he is a good God. So coming back to, in your singleness stage, something that God really convicted me of was the amount of romantic comedies I was watching was setting me up for unrealistic expectations.
Oh, interesting.
That I was starting to believe that men would behave according to a script, and that, really, if I can just ask you at home, wherever in your car, wherever you're listening to this, can you think of a movie that lists in the correct order meeting, dating, engagement, marriage, sex, kids?
Nope.
Like,
yeah.
Like, the things that we fill our minds with are not setting us up for success relationally. And so there was I believe that media has a lot to answer for in pulling down the sacredness and the awesomeness of marriage, but also in setting us up for realistic expectations. Do you know what I found? Was when I pulled back on watching this stuff, and then I was blessed to be able to meet Trent, that reality was so much better than the rom-coms.
Wow.
Like the way he's interacting with me, the way that he's spending time with my family, the way that we chose not to kiss before our wedding, like how much fun and safety and thrill that amplified our dating stage with, because suddenly you had to get creative with the way that you expressed affection. Suddenly you were like, wow, let's do a campfire outside and I'm going to set up fairy lights and bring out this, picnic and, just the creativity that it forces you to stimulate, adds safety and allows people around you to really rejoice with you when that relationship progresses. I believe that for a relationship to be truly joyful, when it progresses, you want people around you to be cheering you on, not to be like, oh, really? Did you choose to marry him? Like you want them to be like, yes, that's so good. I love that you guys are getting married. I love that you met.
No, that's good.
What do you do with the people who, unfortunately, because of various things that either the church said they went through, when you talk about purity, it's a trigger word as opposed to a blessing to them to think about, like, hey, the holiness of the kingdom would have me not run up to the boundary line, but look backwards and say, how holy can we be? Not like how close can we push ourselves? And so when they hear purity, it's like, please, I do not want to deal with that topic.
Yeah. So if you think about sex as being a fire, you put that fire in a cold stone cabin, and how exciting that is and how warm it is. But you put that same fire in an electrical board of an elevator or a lift and how damaging that can be. You think about sex as being water that's inside a dam, and in that dam, like, it has the power to, give power to an entire city. Or if those dam walls break, then it floods an entire city and leaves a path of destruction. Or you think about sex as being sticky tape, and you put it on your arm or on, a piece of wrapping paper, and then you rip it off and it takes a little bit of that with it. And then you put on something else, and instead of being so sticky, you rip it off. And again, it's picking up bits of, the surface that was there, and you rip it off and you rip it off and you rip it off. And suddenly what was meant to keep a husband and wife together for life suddenly has lost its glue. And I believe so strongly that purity, like, even if we have crossed the line in our past, that we serve the God of second chances, and that he is big enough for us to say to our future spouse, I have kept myself for 3 years for you. I've kept myself for 10 months for you. And through that process, that you would pray that God would protect you from having the flashbacks. Because when you're kissing your spouse, you don't want to be thinking about all those other past experiences. But we serve the God of second chances, who acknowledges that we live in a sinful world. But as we learn light, our responsibility is to adopt those behaviors and see them as coming from a good and loving God, not someone who wants to steal the fun away, but someone who wants to, like, sincerely amplify your relationship with fun. So it is never too late to take a moment, whether you're in a relationship, whether you've been in one in the past, but just to say, you know what? I think we need to do less, because in this stage, less is more. And that is going to not be an obstacle then for me in my spiritual walk. It's going to test the true foundation of this relationship. Like, is it just based on physical enough alone? And I
love it.
Good.
I love
That's
it.
good.
I really want to speak to those who are listening right now that, hey, you've potentially gone further than you intended to. You've gone beyond what you believe God would have in the confines of a loving married covenant relationship. And you're listening, and you might be feeling guilt right now even. And that's the last thing that we want you to feel. But we do want you to feel is the mercy and grace of God. And like Erin said, it's this notion of, hey, you can begin again. And don't give up that hope, that dreary hope. Well, I already messed up. It's done, whatever. No, like, recognize that God's mercy is good for us every single day.
Yeah.
We're going to fail in all kinds of
Amen.
ways. What if
His
we did
mercies
that?
are new.
Yeah, and he's wanting to build a new
Every
creation in us. And so if you take that logic like, oh, whatever, with everything, we would be a mess completely. So don't let this area and aspect of your life slip away because of a mistake of the past, or maybe a culture that you're living in now. God yearns to bring about a new creation in you in this season. So my prayer for you is that you would recognize that. So Erin, that was a great point.
And when you say, like, God, it's too hard, I've done too much, I've gone too far, like, he's God of the impossible. And you have to believe that is true for this as well.
Yeah. Amen. So Erin, I did want to ask you this question. So in 1 Corinthians 7, Paul comments on relationships and calls both singleness and marriage as gifts. Would you agree that Paul thinks that singleness really is a gift? And if so, what is the purpose of that gift right now for those who are listening?
So in verse 28 of this chapter, Paul acknowledges very openly that the married will have problems. I've only been married for 3 months, but I am a nursing lecturer, and we talk with our nurses about leadership and teamwork. And one of the concepts is forming a team. They go through different stages. The second stage is storming. And when you are developing a close relationship with someone, you realize that you have differences of opinions because you have different upbringings, different values, different ways of handling money. And all of those things can produce potentially these problems that Paul was talking about. Also, too, like some of Trent's classmates who were wanting to go into ministry, wanting to follow the call that they believed God had put on their life, and felt restricted in that because of who they were married to. For those reasons, yes, singleness is a gift.
Right.
When there are fewer strings attached. But marriage was God's idea. And we need to recognize that it was a good God who knew that we would need the character refining process.
Yeah.
I remember someone saying marriage is not for our happiness, but for our holiness.
Yes.
Like it actually teaches you.
That's Gary Thomas in the book Sacred Marriage. I love that book.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. That humility, that patience, that love, that joy, that selflessness, putting someone else's needs above your own, like it helps you get ready for the kingdom, being in a relationship. And when you think in Ecclesiastes about a threefold cord is not easily broken, like you, your spouse, and God, that's the Trinity. You know, it's that three-way relationship. It really does give you a whole new perspective on God. Yes, I believe that singleness is a gift. And I believe that if you rush into relationships without fully developing yourself during your singleness, then the product you can offer your spouse one day is not as developed as what it could be and what it should be.
Great point.
And I think also, like you said earlier in the conversation, was this time when you get to be single, you get to work on that marriage with God. You get to work on who you are as a person. When you say my maker is my husband, I think what I see there is, like you just said, marriage is for holiness. Like that still happens when you're single as well, when you're actually pursuing that relationship with God.
Yeah.
So I think it can be a gift in that way as well.
I would challenge people when they think that there is a lack in their singleness, just because if the purpose of singleness was simply to get ready and then to find a spouse and then to be whole, what about Paul? What about Jesus? Were they not fully human? Right? Were they not fully complete as single men and women?
Yeah.
You know, like when a woman chooses to become a nun, or a man, you know, of Catholic, you know, background, they want to be a priest. Are they not fully human because they've chosen a life of celibacy? Or the individual who's, you know, struggling with their identity and they're like, you know what, it's better for me to be just celibate. Okay, all right. Are they not fully human? No, like you can't go down that rabbit hole. And so I think the problem though emerges when we're yearning for a relationship and we don't have it. I think that brings out the whole. I think what Erin, you've been pointing at is like, listen, singleness has its purpose. It has its season. Fully embrace it, fully live in it, and recognize that God has called you to do so much in this time, as opposed to doing so little. I think that's a huge, unfortunate reality that some people feel like, well, I've yet to live what I really want to. I'm waiting for. Man, don't wait. Don't wait.
Don't wait. Life doesn't start when you're in a relationship, or it doesn't start when you get married. Life is happening now.
Yeah, yeah.
Don't miss it.
Yes, yes.
A little bit ago, you talked about how you are kind of born into this leadership role in a way. We talked at the top of the podcast about how the church as a whole often has messages about the relationship stage, but not necessarily about singleness all the time. So I guess I'm asking, what do you think as someone who's somewhat of a leader? I know your parents are in leadership positions as well. What do you think that those out there who are doing things in their church at a local level, in leadership positions, what should we be doing to speak value, to pour value into the singleness stage of relationships?
Yeah, this one's really simple. So Bible studies, small groups, getting people connected in healthy church, youth, social events. So also, distributing resources. There is a brilliant book that you all need to go read called Messages to Young People. It's written by Ellen White. And I remember I was at my mum and dad's house, and I looked at my dad's library and saw this book, Messages to Young People. And I was like, well, I'm a young person. It must have something to say to me. And it really does. It's written by a lady called Ellen White. And in addition to that resource, there was another book called Letters to Young Lovers that she wrote specifically to people who were in contemplation of a relationship or in a relationship. And she talks about qualities and questions to ask. And I just really want to read to you 3 epic criteria that if you are looking at someone and wondering if you should start a relationship with this person, because there's plenty of people out there that we could all marry, she says these things. Let the question be raised. Will this union help me heavenward? Will it increase my love for God? And will it enlarge my sphere of usefulness in this life? If these reflections present no drawback, then in the fear of God, move forward.
Wow.
So if the person that you're looking at is not going to help you heavenward, increase your love for God, or enlarge your sphere of usefulness, then you should probably stop and have second thoughts on that.
Wow.
Just the simplicity of that. But if it does tick these boxes, then have the courage to take a step forward. Don't just stay socializing, rubbing shoulders with them forever, or don't just stay dating them forever. Like God calls us to progress. And if, in 1 Corinthians, Paul talks about, if you are burning with passion, it's not wrong to marry. God has created marriage for the stability of society. It does us all benefits.
Yeah.
So in our churches, I believe that labeling meetings or camps as singles meetings is particularly unattractive to make people want to register.
Yeah.
But things like camp meetings and summer camps,
right,
and pathfinders and small groups and Bible studies, those are healthy places for young people of similar age, same goals to meet together and see each other serve.
And what I hear you saying in that, like something we've come back to time and time again here, is just you're creating opportunities in those types of environments for spiritual growth in those individuals. And when you do that, then you as a church leader are creating an opportunity for your single people to get to know their maker in a better way, and then hopefully 1 year, 2 years, 5 years down the track, they're still on that journey and they can look left, look right, and find the right person there with them. As we close, I want to ask if you've got any questions that we can think about, like questions to the listener that they can be thinking about themselves over the next week or so as they reflect on, especially any of the listeners out there who might still be in this singleness stage.
All right. So if you are in this singleness stage, question for you: how important is that God box for you? Another question: doesn't matter what stage you're in, what self-development, whether you're married, dating, single, what self-development do you next need to work on?
Yeah.
because you can still develop yourself even within a marriage. I don't expect that my self-development has flattened out just because I'm
graduated.
And yeah, let's go with third question. Who is there around you that you need to mentor in this space? So when you are single, being aware that one day someone is going to ask you questions that's in the shoes that you're in now. And so you can learn things at this stage that's going to benefit someone later on. So another reason not to hate where God has you right now, because I was single too. And now I get to speak into that space because that was my lived experience.
Right. So repeat that question again. Who is
the last one? Yeah, is who can you mentor in this space? Who is there around you that is particularly hurting or in the relationship field? And whatever stage you're in, who is there that maybe you just need to touch base with and speak some truth, some biblical truth and support into their lives?
Based on your own experience.
I love it. Yeah. I love it. Thank you, Erin. This is so rich.
Yeah. Did you have any resources? Like you mentioned a couple of books there. Did you have anything in particular extra that you thought we should be thinking about as we think about this journey?
Yep. So my resources, grab a pen. Number 1, your Bible.
Yeah.
Best resource on relationship you could ever have. Number 2, we spoke about 101 questions to ask before you get engaged. And honestly, you could read that if you were single, dating, engaged, married.
Right.
What it does is it opens up all conversations to be had. So nothing then is secret. Like you will learn everything about each other, but it's that honesty and transparency that is so necessary. Then those 2 books of Ellen White, Messages to Young People and Letters to Young Lovers. Could not highlight enough of what she had to write.
Awesome.
As I was
well, we will put those in the show notes. Thank you so much, Erin. It's been great to chat and for sharing your wisdom with us. It's been great.
Thank you to both of you. And look forward to chatting again soon.
And thanks everyone for listening in on our conversation today. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Again, message us on Instagram at Choose to Overflow. Or visit our website, choosetooverflow.com. You can find all our past episodes and even a downloadable summary and reflection guide that'll have those questions Erin just gave us for today's episode. We want those ideas to help stick in your mind. You can also share what you've learned with others. That's choosetooverflow.com. And again, thanks to our audio engineer, Zach Cast, and the Loma Linda University Church for their support of this podcast.
Hey, and as we always do, I want to pray a blessing over you. God, speak into everyone's life today. Jesus, I know that some people are in different stages of their life. They might be married. They might be desiring to be married. God, they might be just in a struggling relationship. Father, speak life into them. Give them a pursuit of holiness, no matter what stage they're in. And Father, I pray that you would set our hearts on fire for the kingdom, that we would be more useful with the people around us than not. God, thank you so much for this time with Erin, and we praise you for her life and this marriage that she's in. God, bless her in this season that she's in right now. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
We want to encourage all of you to choose to overflow.